Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, this is Fred Iantorno, Executive Director of CIECA. Welcome to the CIECAcast. Today's presentation will provide a summary of the changes and additions to the BMS in the 2014 R1 release. Today, Dan Webster will present those changes and additions. Dan is a senior architect at Mitchell International, specializing in trading partner integrations. Dan has worked on auto physical damage integrations for over 20 years and enjoyed an insider's view of the collision industry's transition from proprietary communication protocols and data formats to today's more standardized environment. I want to thank all of you for spending the next hour with us and our presenter for sharing his insight and expertise with all of us. I will now turn this over to our presenter, Dan Webster of Mitchell International. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Fred, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This has become somewhat of a tradition to meet twice a year with CIECA's Architecture Committee and work through a new release of our BMS with all of its schemas and code lists and documents, and then to present what we've done to audience at these webinars. And here we are again in 2014 talking about what's new. One thing I want to introduce here, and I might come back to it other times during the presentation, is that as a volunteer group, we're always seeking participation. Your expertise, your requests, and your help in reviewing things. And it could be that next time we meet for one of these QA sessions during a release, you could be joining us, and I would like to see it. The overview of our release package, as always, is that it contains three primary elements. BMS, the Business Message Suite document, the code list, actually hundreds of code lists in a massive Excel spreadsheet, and two different sets of schemas in XSD files for, well, we'll get into the exact specifics of what's in those later. We're going to be talking today about the changes to the BMS document by functional area. We'll be talking similarly by functional area about the code table changes and some general release changes that make our documents much more usable. Next. The first thing we want to reemphasize is BMS, as we've been calling it for many years, was Business Message Specification, and we're re-announcing that the Business Message Suite is what we mean now by BMS. Our BMS is organized into sections. Section 1 is a welcome and overview. Section 2 are the rules and definitions. Section 3 is the common elements and aggregates that we use. And Section 4 through 18 are the CIECA messages themselves. And these are the sections 4 through 18. This is a growing list that currently starts with assignment service, estimate services, disposition services, attachment services, parts and materials, and repair order services, vehicle repair status service, authorization service, invoice statement and remittance service, location service, survey service, valuation service, title service, claim service, status service, and our newest one, appointment service. And building on what I said before, your number 19 could be whatever your company needs from CIECA. The organization of these sections in 418 are the messages, and each of the sections has this organization. It has its own introduction, the functionality of what that service is for, and using Section 4 as an example, we talk about the aggregates and elements that are common only to this section. Otherwise, they would be promoted to Section 3. And then 4.2 through 4.6 are the request messages alternated with the responses to those requests. code list, which we refer to constantly, and I do in my work, and I know other committee members I meet with do, is a Excel workbook with a first worksheet, an index page where you can hyperlink to the other one's name. The last worksheet is the change log, where we go through all the work we've done since the last release and answer questions as to why a code is in there, when it changed, etc. And all the others, the 175 intervening tabs, are the code tables themselves. Our schemas go into two zip files within the release. The first one, we refer to it as the classic code list schema, where the code lists are placeholders and there isn't any enforcement of the enumerations within the schema itself. And for the last few years, we've had a code extension or strictified schema where each entry in each code list is an enumeration in the XSD schema file, and the validation of the XML markup will tell you if you use the codes properly. The changes for our release 2014 R1 came from these committees: claim save, recycled parts and inventory, salvage, scheduling, subrogation, and vehicle damage and imaging. Each of these committees only gets together when they have new work to do, things to add or change schemas and parts of the release. The Section 2 structure has had a number of changes, one being for the first time in a few years a change to the phone number format, where the local number portion of it went from 8 characters of maximum length to 9, and this is for support of phone numbers. Now, we had to talk about this morning about how the phone numbers came to be, what a standard format they comply with, etc. And this is pretty much a CIECA created and maintained format for a phone number that we planned in 2001 to be support for every international number we could think of. But when you actually go to a foreign country, you learn a few things, and this is one of the things we learned. Now, if anyone on the call happens to be an expert in standard phone number formats and wants to join our committee, you would be our best friend in a big hurry. We've also changed the tables. It's been in there since the inception of BMS about the date and time field, and in a recent integration of one of our member companies, we found out that has been wrong all this time, but no longer. In Section 3, the common aggregate, the person name aggregate has had an extra element added to it for the second last name, which is of interest to integrations in foreign countries. In the vehicle license common aggregate, we added a registration date, sometimes known as date first registered by American Departments of Motor Vehicles. And in the other reference information, the number part, the reference number, the value part of the name value pair was increased from 15 characters maximally to 50. In Section 3, the claim info for subrogation, we added a party type to the claim info, and those party types were to support responsible party and demanding party. Using our structure, of course, the party types can use anything in that code list, but this was the reason for the change. And then in the fact part of claim information, we added a liability percentage field. In Section 11 for the invoice, we made these changes to remittance information better. we changed two options: the invoice batch reference number, the invoice batch UUID, the total number of invoices paid, and total number of invoices rejected. And then for the remittance info header, we added a bank country code. So this tells me that those messages are now being used and the implementations are illustrating the things we need to tweak, and that's always a good stuff. Also on the invoice, we've added a subrogation invoice message in aggregate and added subrogation remittance message in aggregate. Changes for vehicle damage and imaging. There was a change made to the vehicle damage assignment. It seems simple, but by adding profile info to the content model for an assignment, it means the assignment can carry with it the labor rates and settings to be used in writing an estimate, moving things a step ahead of where you would otherwise check these things only after the fact. The phone number change mentioned earlier was for VDI. The date and time changes apply to this, as do the second last name and the person name and the license registration date in the vehicle license date. Changes for salvage include salvage event edition, a NICB report date, and a NIMVITAS report date. Now that NIMVITAS, I'm told by listening to Charlie all these years, is approved pronunciation for that, but those of you who've been on many committee calls understand that's also what it sounds like when you read the antitrust disclaimer. The invoice header was added with an invoice type code, and it supported a new code table, and the salvage invoice details added an invoice type code, a second new code table. Changes for RP&I was a procurement section, audited to ensure support for recycled parts, and it does indeed came through that audit by supporting all the part types, and the implementation guide and business cases got up to an implementation guide with 500 pages at this point. Changes for claim save were we identified the need for the ID info to repeat. Changes for subrogation. Claim information added a party type, as discussed above. The facts added a liability percentage, and we added subrogation invoice message in aggregate and subrogation remittance message in aggregate. Changes for scheduling are the newest and most active committee. We added an appointment confirmation request message, added an appointment confirmation response message, added an inspection report request message, and an inspection report response message. The code list changes changed from the last time in 2013 R2 was a new look. The index page column A was the same name with a link. The index page column B is new code table description, so it makes this index more useful and more important than ever, given that you can't see even a tiny fraction of the available tabs across the bottom anymore. And then the code lists themselves, the A and B columns have always been the code, a description of it, and beyond column B, we've left space for implementer notes, and we've got a growing number of those. The changes to the code list in this 2014 R1 release were to the cause of loss code list, country code code list, coverage category, error code, document type, document subtype, and inspection description. In addition, we've got many additions to the ID qualifier code table, the invoice rejection error code. We added invoice type code table, location type, got a few new entries, options, likewise, part type, we got all those audited entries from recycled parts and inventory, added an invoice type code table, and made some changes to the location type. Options, we added many more. Part type, payor type, procurement document type, salver status update code, state province code, total type, and total subtype. And entries to the transmission code table for VDI, vehicle service and charges for salvage, and vehicle service and charges description for salvage. Multiple ID qualifiers were requested by various committees, and as currently the main place to put name value pairs within our specification, we've added them for things like a resale certificate ID, an agreement type, a customer type, enterprise ID, evaluation ID, fraudulent claim indicator, language, liability accepted indicator, office ID, police indicator, policy condition, tow indicator, and user ID. The coverage category added codes for comprehensive with deductible, for glass, for liability, theft, fire, and glass, liability, theft, fire, glass, insured with deductible, and 6 new motorcycle coverage codes. In the error codes, we added 2 for status of the rental does not permit modification, and status of rental does not permit cancellation. CDI's code list changes included adding to location type a drive-in location type, in situ, and storage lot. Options were added to VDI. We found some duplicate codes and obsoleted them. For the state province code, we added a number of province enumerations for the provinces of Spain, and learned that the is basic Latin restriction of our code list enumerations doesn't prevent special characters for foreign languages, and we had to work through that issue. And transmission code, a little more easy to deal with the codes, but we found 22 codes for standard and automatic type that member companies were using but weren't in the code list yet. The salvage code list changes were the adding an invoice type code table, and code table additions had country code in them, and that was for the bank country code tag. Inspection description, we have a virtual inspection type now, and the salver status update codes added a buyer renege, NICB reported, and NVIDIS reported. Salvage made these changes to the code list for a total subtype. We've added gross. For vehicle service and charges, we added towing company cleanup, EPA cleanup, extrication, so a stuck vehicle, fire department, lien fees, police release fee, priority response, restocking fee, preservation fee, title fee, VIR fee. Vehicle service and charges description added a code to match vehicle service and charges. Actually, we added codes to match that other list. The code list changes for recycled parts instant inventory were to add an instant messaging type, added CPM. Part types, we added recycled aftermarket, recovered OE with damage, and recovered OE without damage. And for procurement document type, we added quoted parts no longer available. The subrogation code list changes were to cause of loss. New causes of loss were backing up, multi-vehicle collision, pedestrian, parking, run off-road collision, towing accident, and other weather-related. To document type, we added subrogation, invoice, and remittance. And invoice rejection error code added amount did not clear bank, fee percentage error, and no subrogation fee due. Subrogations code list changes were to payor type, where we added claimant, insured, and subrogation vendor. To total type, we added subro deductible amount to insured, subro demanding party recovery amount, subro vendor contingency fee, and subro vendor invoice. And getting some of these new codes reminds me of our early days of converting from EDI and EMS to BMS, and talk about whether 2 or 3 capital letters might be enough to describe all of our CIECA codes. As for the total subtype, we've added gross, subrogation damages recovered, and subrogation costs recovered. Scheduling code list changes to document subtype, we've added cancel. The activity in the architecture area were to workflow documents. We've been working on guidelines and schema guidelines. We have new and updated implementation guide and created an Appendix C, and we initiated a test bed for release testing. And this is exciting because the release process has included in years past a stage where the draft release was issued and there was some indeterminate waiting period for member companies to do their testing, whatever that meant, and come back with a release recommendation. And for 2014 R1, that is closer to the way we're doing it than using a new test bed, but the potential is there that members have contributed documents to test for the new things they want for this release and for ongoing backward compatibility tests. So we're expecting great things from them. A general change to each implementation, we changed the headings of each section of the BMS, where each section had a descriptive name like claim information, and now we're just going straight to the XML tags in this XML tag format, which looks a lot better in the sidebar in Word and allows us to scroll independently of the other panel. And Fred's going to show us that now by going to the BMS document. So this is exactly the example we were talking about. On this page, you see both claim info and policy info, which go right from the paragraph number to the actual XML tags. That is really what we were after anyway when we got in the habit of using this. And the beauty of it is, as Fred's shown you on the left, you can see that bar on the side which shows the paragraph numbers and the tags. And if you look at claim info on the screen in front of us, you'll see, for example, additional ID info is identified as section 3.1.21, and Fred can scroll up on the left till he sees 3.1.21, and with a single click jump there, which we were all discussing how this differs from the prior process of paging up and trying to remember while you're doing so what number you were going for. this was also an example of the same structure of 3.1.21 applies to 4 different tags, and I think our record of these is 22 or something, and it makes it much easier to go right to the tags instead of the descriptive name. Thanks, Fred. I think we've demonstrated everything on that slide. Another thing we've had interesting discussion about were the names and how one could associate the name of the release, which is for the year and release number, to the versions of the XML schema files within that release package. And our solution has been to rename the release package to have both the year and release number and the number, BMS version number that resides within the BMS files themselves. For several years, the file names have also been suffixed with a date that we worked on it and released it in the architecture committee, and this time only we've gone triply redundant, and the 4.9 release goes by the date of 0409, but I don't think we can count on that for future releases. We audited all the revision column entries. I'm not sure why we hadn't thought of this before. I guess we're getting better and better at cleaning up this CMS, but Charlie did a lot of work in this release cycle to make sure the entry for the first introduction of a new aggregate or the last change to an aggregate element is the leftmost column in the BMS tables, and he reviewed those things to make sure they were actually changes impacting the schema, not changes to the example wording or other less significant things that we wouldn't want to track in that change date. What we're working on for the next release, 2014 R2, the salvage committee needs changes to finalize their invoice and remittance messages. Segregation is looking for changes for new invoice and remittance changes, business cases. And committees are developing their implementation guide FC business cases, and this may require change.
Okay, I want to thank you, Dan, and thank you for all of you in the audience for participating and listening this morning. I want to kind of wrap things up by telling you a little bit about BMS MC, and I'm sure you've heard something about it, but I wanted you to kind of hear it again. This is CIECA is right now investigating and researching the JSON standards, which is the JavaScript object notation. There's a CIECAcast that we did it on this, and that's available on the website. And you just look under the learning section, and it will be there. Also, I want to let you know that there will be 3 different presentations at the CIECA Symposium. There'll be 1 business and 2 technical. Also, I want to invite you. Please mark on your calendars July 22nd, same time, for the next CIECAcast, which is entitled "Why Use the Estimatics BMS versus the EMS," and this is from a business perspective. Lastly, I want to invite you all to the CIECA 2014 Symposium, which will be held in Denver, Colorado, September 8th through the 10th. And I want to encourage you to register as soon as possible. Again, thank you to Dan, and thank you to our audience. One last thing is, within 48 hours, the recording of this presentation and the PowerPoint slides will be available on the website. Thank you and have a great day.